Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You're listening to the Unsugarcoated Podcast with your host, Aalia.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of your favorite social good podcast, here addressing all survivors of trauma. You badass people out there living an amazing life today. I want to say thank you. I want you to appreciate everything because I was driving here. And I was here listening to the news, you guys. There's a lot going on in the world. And I just, I think it is important for us to take a moment, to take a deep breath, be thankful for where we are, where you've come through, and be positive about where we're still going. I just returned from Art Basel in Miami on Sunday. I have to say it was an amazing experience for so many reasons. And I want to kind of give you this quote. I was recently reminded that a candlelight in the daytime is barely visible, but a candlelight in the dark exposes everything and appears brighter. We were designed to thrive in darkness. Us survivors of traumas, us resilient people who find a way out of almost the worst situations and most difficult, challenging moments of our life. And you know how we do. We bring people to carry on that conversation. But before I bring on an amazing guest that we are so thankful to have today to speak on this conversation, still in the vein of Art Basel, which for those of you who don't know, Art Basel is actually an amazing worldwide event. It happens in Basel, Hong Kong, and Miami every year. It is a for-profit collection of world-leading shows that takes place, and they aim to connect collectors, galleries, and artists, and act as a driving force in support of galleries in nurturing the careers of artists. Well, why artists? Why am I bringing this up? Because to me, one of my biggest takeaways from this event, as many art events that I attend and that I love to go to, is because art is about humanity. Art is something, it's even a language, and not everyone speaks the same language, by the way, which is why one person can go up to a piece of art and say, I see it, I hear it, I get the message. And another person will look up and be like, I don't get it. So there's a picture showing right now, and I love it for the audience. It's a little girl with some paper, some pencils, and some markers in front of a huge, beautiful piece of art that was at Art Basel. As I was going to leave the convention center, I saw this little girl, and it struck me because I thought, this is what I am talking about. Look at the impact. This little girl is sitting beneath a painting, and she's just drawing her little heart away. And I found her mother amongst the audience because I wasn't sure if the little girl was part of the installation, because at Art Basel you will see live art, but it turns out it wasn't. And the mother shared with me that through the pandemic they'd started to go to art shows, and they started giving their little girl a paper and pencil and watching her skill level increase as she just simply sits down and writes whatever speaks or draws whatever speaks to her in her own way. How fabulous is that, right? How empowering is that? And one of the other things that was quite impressive at the show was a 10-year-old boy, Andres Valencia, 10 years old. Let me tell you, this kid stole the show, you guys. He's 10 years old. His parents bought him, started buying him canvases also over the pandemic. And now his art is selling for thousands of dollars. So yes, I told my 5-year-old to get on it. But on top of that, all kidding aside, art is a perfect way to communicate and highlight the issues and problems that arise in society. This is what artists are often doing, and a lot of times people don't see that. So it being so powerful and knowing that art does a lot for humanity, we're very honored to have our guest today because he happens to be not only an amazing manager, but also a father of one of the most leading iconic musical artists that we know of today. But we're here to talk about his experiences, both personal and some key advice on surviving trauma. We've gone through this pandemic. How is he moving his movement forward? And without further ado, I'm very excited to share him with you. So with that, let's get to it. Author, professor, lecturer, motivational speaker, music executive, artist manager, entrepreneur, fighter, and cancer survivor would be the words used to sum up the life and career of Mr. Mathew Knowles. Dr. Knowles possesses an MBA in Strategic Planning and Organizational Culture, PhD in Business Administration, and recently attended Harvard's Professional Development courses in Ethical Leadership, as well as Developing Cultural Intelligence. As a pioneer for African American success in the corporate world, Knowles' corporate career includes the sales and marketing at some of the leading medical technology companies before transitioning to music. He has worked with legends such as Shaka Khan, OJ's, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and many others before eventually managing his own daughters. Now having sold over 450 million records worldwide, he has architected the careers of Destiny's Child, Beyoncé, and Solange, and today he is speaking on survivorship of trauma and the power of artistry. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Mathew Knowles. Hello, Dr. Knowles. How are you?
Hello, how are you today? I'm talking with you from Houston, Texas. Um,
Texas
so
is
I'm
in the house.
happy to have this opportunity.
Thank you, thank you. I love. My husband is from Dallas and originally from East Texas, so Texas is definitely near and dear in our home. Okay, so by the way, happy recent holidays. I hope that they were good, and congratulations. I also saw your son-in-law was just recently inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if I'm not mistaken. I saw that while I was in Miami, funny enough. Congratulations. How's the family taking the continued success?
Well, with gratitude, anytime that you have these type of opportunities and you worked so hard for your passion and you get acknowledged by your peers and fans, it's a feeling of gratitude. And I tell you one thing, you talked about the holidays and Thanksgiving. I will say that I have began to rethink a lot of holidays, and certainly uh, Thanksgiving is a time for family. But I certainly have rethought the messaging in the past of what Thanksgiving was, what it did to Native Americans, how it impacted them has really changed how I feel about it.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. One of our theme, and of course with our entire organization, Unsugarcoated, that is something that is real. I think with emotional intelligence and knowledge and acknowledgement, I mean, especially from any community who knows what it is to feel that they are marginalized and being put down, how you view that. So if you want to expand, in what way has your thoughts changed toward that particular holiday?
Well, as I began to do my research, and it was really this year that I began to research Thanksgiving and the Puritans and coming to America and having a devastating winter. Um, a lot of the Indians had died off by disease. Some feel as though those that had come from Europe actually poisoned some of the Indians. But this was the Indians trying to, as I understand in my research, reaching out to help to teach how to grow certain crops. And instead of having this celebration to thank them, it wasn't that at all. As a matter of fact, my research shows that after this celebration, there was a celebration, but it wasn't with the Native Americans. And then afterwards, that there was actually a number of Native Americans killed.
Right.
So still some gray area there, and we need to understand better the true meaning of Thanksgiving. I think the true meaning for me is family, and I think we should still celebrate that. But there's a lot of holidays we're beginning to understand just weren't true
Right.
and are not true.
And the origins of them. I agree myself. I believe it was interesting because I have a 5-year-old daughter is my youngest, or she's almost 5, and she came home from her preschool with an Indian feather cap or Native American cap, and she said, "Oh, Indians." And it was just very interesting because in my heart, and my husband, and I'll be very candid, he was kind of like, well, maybe she's too young for this. I said, no, because that's what happened. Those beliefs get set in stone when we're younger, and then when we get older, we're told the truth, and we don't want to believe it. So it was like, even as young as she is, I still wanted to, I didn't want to lay anything too heavy on her, but I wanted her to understand that, what we focused on should be the family time, and that there is some not pleasant history to that holiday. Same thing with Christopher Columbus. Many people, and I think there's a time of reckoning right now for a lot of people expecting
Yeah.
us to own up to that, right? So, and I feel like this is part of where you're also your study. You were part of this amazing Harvard program and ethical leadership and developing cultural intelligence. I mean, that's got to be a big part too of this awareness you have and lending to that, I imagine.
Well, I really enjoyed this. My second summer going back to a professional development courses at Harvard University. This past summer, I took cultural intelligence. We so often want to say, well, I treat everybody the same. We're all the same. But that's untrue. We have to understand the cultural differences between all of us. And when we begin to embrace the cultural differences, the way that a black community might approach a problem and a way a white community might approach a problem could be different. If we start understanding even culturally, for example, in business, if I was shaking the hands of a leader in corporate America in Japan, I would shake his hand very softly, and I would make various gestures of respect by bowing. Um, we need to begin to understand how culturally different we are and stop this whole thing, we're all the same. We're not all the same, we're different. And by the
Right.
way, when people say they don't see color, that's straight up BS. We see color.
I agree. I happen to be colorblind. This is not a joke, and I love it that you say that because every time somebody says, "Oh, well, I know I see color, I just don't see it the same way that others do," and regardless, when I do see a color, I want to see it because it's actually a gift to see it, right? So I love that you brought that up. I definitely will return to that because I think it's so critical, especially with business. We're going to get into your business acumen and kind of that journey. But I do appreciate that you said that. I myself hold an international business degree, and being Middle Eastern as well as American and having a multicultural background, I understand. Like there's certain places you wouldn't want to shake with your left hand because that's a certain meaning or cultural significance in that culture. And I think a lot of Americans are like, well, why do I need to learn what other people know? They come to my place. No, I shouldn't have to make an exception for them. But we are a multicultural society in general. And to your point, I think the more successful you want to be, the more you should. So is that why you would encourage other people to kind of get out there and learn these things?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because, for example, there are some cultures that before they eat a meal, they say a prayer. Well, that's offensive to other cultures who, when they eat a meal, they say words of gratitude to themselves afterwards.
Right.
And so it's just a matter of understanding that there are differences in the world and how simply by the things that you do without thinking, just making an assumption that everyone does it the way that you do it.
Mm.
That's really, when we begin to uh, consider ourselves privileged also.
Now, in the past, you've spoken on racism and trauma of being a black man. Share with me how some of your experiences have shaped your desire to really speak to other people in your community and encourage people to move past the traumas and heal from them, especially with regards to racism.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think we've all now in this new world understand that there are behaviors and there are things that happen in our past that are still with us. And it's not uncommon for someone to say that this happened 30 years ago. We used to uh, totally just turn our heads to when someone said that and discredited their thoughts. But now we understand, and courts have shown that trauma can exist for many, many years. For myself, I grew up in a small town in Gaston, Alabama. Never went to a black school. Uh, Throughout my time in Gaston, Alabama, went to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga, and finally went to a black school my junior year of college at Fisk University in Nashville. But growing up as a child and being the first and being beaten and being electric prodded and marching for desegregation and getting to meet Dr. King and other major leaders, but I was a child, and the fear and the being made to feel as though I was less than, and how has that impacted my life? And it took a very long time as there was a part of my life that's a very chaotic part of me. And it took me going to therapy to try to understand this chaos I was internalizing. Um, and it really went back to the trauma that I faced when I was growing up as a child.
Understood, understood. So, one of the things I've heard you speak on into the audience, if you have not checked out more of what Dr. Knowles says around the world, you definitely should, is that you were always drawn to business. You were drawn to business, you wanted to be a businessman. What was it about that? And was that part of one of the things that happened after certain traumas in your childhood was being in business, or, what was it that drew you to that world specifically?
Well, although my parents had their daytime jobs, menial, very menial daytime jobs, they were entrepreneurs after work. My dad used to tear down old houses, sell all the metals, take cars and sell all the parts. My mother would convince the white woman who she worked for to ask her and all of her friends to any hand-me-downs, and my mother and two best friends made quilts. So my parents I credit for giving me an entrepreneurial spirit, uh, and seeing them in the midst of, in the daytime, making $30 a week and $15 a week, that they found a way through entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial spirit to make ends meet in a good way.
Mm-hmm. And so you ended up going to corporate world before you eventually took over, what most people know you for now as the manager of your daughters and music groups. Because I know that before them you were already in the music. You had your toe, maybe your ankle, foot in the music world already. So, what was the paradigm shift that made you say, I'm going to move from this business world, which is very, which, by the way, there's a lovely thing about corporate world for some people. Some people, the world functions because we all have our parts in it. Nobody, gets shade for anything in this particular place. An honest day's work is an honest day's work, in my opinion. So, but what was the paradigm shift for you that made you say, I'm going to go ahead and, for in one level, leave the corporate world to then transition to the music world?
Well, there's a thing, and I teach this my 16th year in a classroom as a college professor, and I teach entrepreneurship. That's one of the courses that I teach. There's a word not said often, but it's intrapreneurship. You have entrepreneurship, yet you have intrapreneurship. And that's when you run a department or an organization as if you own it with an entrepreneurial belief system. So at Xerox Corporation, I was taught a lot. I still give credit to Xerox Corporation for a lot of my successes. The training in marketing, training in sales, understanding the customer and meeting customer expectations. I took a lot of that, and I call it transferable skills, that in our lives we can transfer most skills that we learned that were really positive skills that we learned. So I have transferred skills from Xerox throughout my career, even into music.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can relate to that because I did have a corporate world in between being an entrepreneur like your parents. I had my day job and then I always was working off on the side. But I was homeless at 14 years old. I had to create opportunity for me. There was no choice. There was no home to go home to. So but I'm agreeing with you that transferable is really what made a difference. So that's why I said I never shade on that. So you find yourself taking these skill sets and you have your family business now. Can you just paint the picture of what that was like for you?
Well, most people don't realize that it's been multiple family businesses. In the 80s, my former wife and I she was the creative force. I didn't know anything about the beauty industry. I was the business force, and we started a very successful hair and nail salon called Headliners in Houston, and grew that business to $1 million business in the 80s. Then we took um, uh, another company, House of Darion, and the Miss Tina clothing line, three different uh, clients, one for the high end, the mid tier, and also low end at Walmart, the Miss Tina. And we sold that business for $75 million. Didn't know anything about the apparel business. And then in the music industry, I think most people realize or know the success the family has had, billions of dollars of success. Um, didn't know anything getting going into the music industry. So again, it's that transferable skills, but also going back and getting knowledge. And there's many ways today you can get knowledge by just taking a course or getting a degree or interning or just building business relationships and going to seminars. So it's about knowledge base. And for me, using that skill set that I learned at Xerox.
Yeah, I love that. I want to take a step back. Sorry, I mean I I always have this challenge of remembering everything in my head so I don't interrupt the lovely things my guests are saying. But because you say that, so you had all this success, I kind of want to take a step back to something you said earlier. You know, you grow up as a black man, often being told you can't do this, and all the reasons that they impose these limiting belief systems onto, you know, the black community specifically, as well as, you know, most minorities. But I'm going to be very candid. I've always, as a person who grew up in this country, felt like, why do the black community get the worst brunt of it? You know, I mean, that's just the truth. So here you are having amazing success. Now people are opening doors for you. You know, obviously there's this catapult of change in station a bit. Was that surreal for you? You know, what were the things that you cognizantly noticed or maybe took stock of?
Well, everybody, first of all, we built a great team. There's a number, maybe even at least 25%, if not more, of Beyonce's staff um, have been with her 25 years. And so it starts with building an amazing staff and watching these young people grow and to their positions. That's part of it. But having someone like Solange and Beyonce and Destiny Shaw, the amazing passion that they have for their craft and their artistry, as you talked earlier, uh, and that passion correlates to this amazing work ethics. Because when you live your passion, as you know, or as most people don't know, when you live your passion, you never work a day in your life. You're just having fun doing what you love, and you want to be the very best at it. So you practice and practice and practice because you want to be the best.
I love that because I feel like you just gave another hint of the formula. I'm always talking about the formula. People are like, what formula? I'm like, the formula. You know, you've said it already. Having the right people around you, that structure, um, understanding the way that marketing and the business works. What other pieces do you feel are really critical components of the formula to reaching your dreams? And I say reaching your dreams because success is always a funny word. To me, it's a very subjective word, right? And what your version of success maybe is could be vastly different from someone else. But whatever it is, their dream, they have an idea. They, like you said, they want to be the best at something. Outside of the couple things that you've said already, what else do you consider critical as part of the formula?
Well, I think there's a lot of common traits. I even write about that in one of my books, The Common Traits. To me, something you said earlier, the roadblock that sometimes set us back. And I talk about that in one of my books, and it's called Thinking Outside the Box, and how we often have similar people like ourselves that we put in a box with us because we are box in thinkers and have been told since childhood, you can't do this because you're a woman. You can't do this because you're black. You can't do this because you're poor or because you're part of the LGBTQ community. We've been conditioning a lot of people to become box in thinkers and believe it. And so we're inside of this box not only are we inside of this box being a box-in thinker, but we bring other people into the box just like us. And so all we have is chaos and walking and hitting walls all day long. And we'll be like, why does this keep happening to me? You hear people say that. Why does the same thing keep happening to me? Because you are still a box-in thinker, having friends like yourself. Once you step outside of that box, and if you could just imagine stepping outside of a box with a group of people, and now you're walking around that box and there's no walls whatsoever stopping you, hindering you from success. That is, for me, an important thing to understand, this box in thinking concept that I think most people are.
Right. I agree. I agree because I see it all the time. I always tell people when someone says to you that you can't do something, look that person in the eye and say, well, thank you. You just showed me your limitations, but you have not shown me mine. I hope you agree with that statement, right? Which I kind of want to, you segue into another point about also box thinkers and what people think is possible and things that quote unquote happen to us. I'm a firm believer at this stage in my life, things just happen. I'm prepared for things to happen in the future. Just because I've overcome cancer or homelessness or certain challenges, I'm aware that I'm still with a pulse and there will still be things in my life that are not going to be pleasant, but I believe I'm resilient enough to face those challenges. You recently faced a challenge yourself. And if you wouldn't mind, how was that? How did that journey begin? What was it like? Was it a phone call? Was it the doctor saying we need to sit down and talk? What was that experience like for you, and how did it change you?
Sure. I'm a cancer survivor. And I always say today I'm a cancer survivor. I can't speak for tomorrow, but today I am. And what happened for me 2.5 years ago, and it goes back, quite frankly, to Xerox Corporation, because I was in a medical division of Xerox, not selling copiers, but selling zero radiography for breast cancer detection. And in that training, you actually get medical training as well, so that you can talk to a radiologist intelligently about breast cancer. And in the 80s, Xerox Medical System was the modality for breast cancer detection. So 2.5 years ago, I wear a lot of white shirts. Today I have on a black t-shirt, but normally I have a white t-shirt on. And I noticed when I took off my t-shirt, if you could imagine a white sheet of paper and 3 red dots on it with a pen, I didn't think anything about it. Actually, I thought, well, my wife might have bought some new t-shirts and maybe there was some red threads or something. Second day, the same thing. Third day, the same thing. Now there's concern. And I asked my wife, I don't know what's happening. I keep seeing these red dots. And she says, honey, when I clean the sheets on your side of the bed, I'm seeing these red dots. And I knew immediately from my training years ago in the 80s. And I knew that men also, 1% is a number that we say. That number, I believe, is much greater. But 1% of men have male breast cancer. I
Right.
call it male chest cancer because
Right.
how we touch that and feel that part of our body is different. And messaging, if that can save lives, then I'm all for it. But I found myself getting a mammogram, getting a biopsy, getting surgery, getting a mastectomy, and then understanding, thinking that it was all past me, that I was BRCA2 mutated genetically, which then brought on a whole bunch of new circumstances of knowing that I have a greater risk because I am BRCA2 and male of having prostate cancer, melanoma, pancreatic cancer, as well as male chest cancer. So I had to do and wanted to do a lifestyle change that made me lose weight, watch my diet very, very carefully, reduction in alcohol consumption, exercise, and stress reduction. And so I'm pleased to say, literally, just last week, I got my test results, my annual test results, and they were really, really great numbers. So I feel really good about where I am at this moment as a cancer survivor.
Well, I love that you will allow yourself to be vulnerable and encourage other men. My grandfather was diagnosed with the same type of cancer that I later was diagnosed with. And I remember he was devastated by it, Dr. Knowles. I mean, he was the manly man. He losing his hair devastated him, all of that. And he passed 9 months after, and it put inside of me a thought of, okay, when you get cancer, you either die rather quickly from it, or you get treated and you move on with your life, or like that was it. You either, these were the two options in my mind. Never did I know that cancer is a journey. And I'm saying that because we are still dealing with a pandemic. And I just got to ask you, when were you exactly diagnosed? What year, what time frame?
It was 2.5 years ago.
Okay, so before the pandemic,
August.
Right?
It was right before.
Okay.
Right before 6 months before the pandemic. And as we got into, I always put the date of March 13th as the date of that pandemic hit my radar because my wife and I was on a flight from California. I'm on the board of the one of the boards that was having Lizzo perform for the rodeo, Houston Livestock and Rodeo, and I got all these text messages and had to, when we landed, realized that the whole world was in an uproar. But I was so fearful about COVID that I was just going way out of the way. Wouldn't want my wife to go outside the apartment, didn't want anything to come inside the apartment, taking my temperature, gosh, I guess 10 to 12 times a day, reading my oxygen meter. I mean, I was just on the whole spectrum of chaos with it. And so I called my therapist. I hadn't spoken to my therapist in years. And I said, I don't know, man, I'm just freaking out about this COVID, and told him my behavior. And he said, when we bring something into a crisis, whatever that crisis could be, if we haven't resolved that something, then it's multiplied 25 times, 25x. And he says, what is it that you haven't resolved yet? And I said, after a number of sessions, I hadn't resolved the fact that I was frightful that I was going to die of cancer. I had not resolved that. So what I brought into the COVID was that fear. And that's why I was so anal about the things I was doing during COVID to keep from getting it.
Right. And, I share a similar, to some extent, my sense of people would say, well, why are you being so concerned? I had friends, my husband and I would only go out on dates with each other. We were very careful. There was definitely the point where he would go to the store, come back, shoes off, got to wash everything, because I didn't want to die. On paper, my doctor was like, look, you could get it and be fine. You could get it and die. We don't know. We just know you're one of the people we don't want to get it. And I agree with what you say. Although, I went into remission in 2014, the last time. And one of the things that COVID, the pandemic, for me, though, was it was reminiscent of life stopping when you get cancer, right? Because, from the day that you got that call, then the trips, the vacation you may have had planned, everything gets changed. Now you have to be careful. Once you get on therapies, you can't be around certain people. There were times when I would get sick or my kids got sick and I would have to keep them in another room, quarantine. This was long before we even knew the word COVID. So I feel like, there's a bit of strength that we can offer. So thank you for being so vulnerable. Do you feel like you've dealt with that now, or do you still carry that emotional, tie with you?
No, I certainly have dealt with that today. And those are just some of the examples of why I believe in therapy and having a therapist and being open about mental illness. All of this is one easy solution: early diagnosis.
Yes.
Be it physical, mental, cancer, cardiovascular disease, or anything else. The sooner you can identify that there's a problem, the better the results will be. It's a real simple formula. Early detection. I feel I'm here today because I was stage 1A and I identified quickly. So gratefully, I only take a pill. Gratefully, that's, what my recovery looks like from a daily perspective. But some people, they find things late in life when it's stage 4. And those are the times where the challenge is greater for
Right.
recovery. So I've always thought early detection, early detection. This new technology and understanding genetics, a simple saliva test, 250 bucks. It'll not tell you if you're going to have cancer or a genetic disease. What it does, it tells you what is your risk factor,
Right.
that you have a greater or lesser risk factor. And if you have a higher risk factor, then there are some uh, things that you should be considering for a lifestyle change. Quite
Yes.
simple.
Yes. And I love that you brought up part of your journey has been including everything because living life to your best potential, to your fullest potential, it does involve uh, addressing your mind, body, and your spirit. What you eat, how you're taking care. I tell myself, I eat to live, not live to eat. Though the mac and cheese tastes good, right? I don't want to live.
Right.
So, I focus. What are some of the things? And I love that you are so honest, so that other men, because the men do. A lot of people in general. I don't want to throw it all on men, but the initial thing when there's a symptom or something happening, it'll be fine, right? Nobody wants to go to the doctor. It's nothing, but it sometimes can be something. So to pay attention to your body. So with your regiment now, is also, what are you doing to address the spiritual? So you spoke about the food and the exercise. How do you manage your spiritual life right now?
Well, I manage my spiritual life, and I tell anyone that's a friend of mine knows this. I work on happiness each and every day. And over my life, I've worked very hard on being number one and winning awards and seeing my artists be the very best in every category, but didn't work on happiness for me. So today I work on happiness, and that looks in many different ways. Sometimes it's simply just looking out the window, just looking out the window and seeing natures, looking and seeing clouds or seeing a bird on the fence or seeing a plant grow, things that I never even thought of before. But just true working on happiness, spending time with my wife and traveling and laughter, having laughter is every day almost. Those are the things that I work on. And I say, we work on every other aspect of our lives and business, but we don't work on happiness, I think, enough.
I love that. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions. One of them is, and just to kind of dovetail what you said, because a lot of people, and I will speak to, I am saying this for the people in the audience that perhaps say, celebrities have everything. They don't have problems. Money gives you happiness, right? Or happiness comes from other things. You say you work on happiness. So for you, where does happiness begin? And if you wouldn't, speaking to some of the people that out there that do have an image of celebrity life somehow being perfect, or somehow meaning that they have everything solved, because, having been around it myself, I know that that's not always the truth. And I'd like to hear your perspective on that.
Well, my perspective, it goes back to something I said earlier, and that is finding what is that thing that you're passionate about. That to me is where happiness starts. There's been time in my corporate career that I would wake up in the morning and say, I hate going to this, or I hate doing this today. Making a whole lot of money, making a whole lot of money, but it didn't fulfill me because it wasn't my passion. So I always say, let's start at stage level 1 and move up to 10. Find out what that passion is first. And when you are doing that and living your passion, Um, you know, when you're living your passion, it's not the money. You get the joy out of whatever it is that you're doing. What I found is people that live their passion. Again, what coexists are work ethics. Those people end up being fundamentally financially satisfied because they love what they're doing and they work on being good at it because they love and enjoy what they're doing. I don't think Beyonce gets behind a microphone and says, I wonder how much money I'm going to make. I think she goes into a studio and creates a song, something that's emotionally attached to her. Practice, 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 and live for that moment of joy that she's able to share that with her fans. I don't think she wakes up saying, how much money am I going to make from the show?
Well, I love that that can be applied to almost anything, and that's quite powerful. Well, what are you passionate about these days? So, what is your true passion, Dr. Knowles?
I'm passionate about motivating and educating people in certain areas, health and wellness being one, entrepreneurship, um, the, the music business side of it. I would get a lot of joy and happiness in working and motivating and educating. Now I'm taking a step into film and TV. I have 3 or 4 projects that we're working on and staying funded to and grounded to doing the things that are happy, which often involve my best friend, who is my wife.
I love that and appreciate that. And though I know you've kind of changed course, I know a lot of people out there listening will say, or wonder, was there any one thing, or if you could say, though I know that there's a formula, but what was probably one of the most critical things? And I'm not really, you have the advantage of Beyonce and Solange being your daughters and other artists that you've worked with, but kind of speaking to across the board, what's the one thing that really, in your opinion, was the right thing to do from a business perspective to go to that next level? And I say this because I have friends who are amazing producers and engineers and work with, great artists, and they say talent out there is not the problem. Everybody has talent. But there's a lot of people that make music that never gets heard. And then there are the great ones. There are the Beyoncés. There are the Madonnas. There are the Jennifer Lopez. If you could put your finger on one very key thing that takes them to the next level business-wise, what would it be?
Well, I don't think it's one thing. I think it's a number of things happening at the same time or around the same time. I think it's a combination of having the God given talent, having the work ethics and passion, having a team of people, band, dancers, business team, record label. I think it's having a great song because none of this really happens with an average song. So it takes having a great song. So it's having the right image, uh, media savvy, and conversation. It's a common combination of all of that. This is a very difficult being in the very top of that, and that's the mistake people make, thinking that it's one thing, and it's remaining focused and not trying to do other types of things. I'm an artist, but I'm a record exec, and I also own my merchandise company, and I also have a new pair of shoes coming out next week, and those are some of the signs of failure when you start doing that so soon. So something that has that much scope, it's impossible to say a one thing that
Why?
makes it happen.
I love that though, and it reemphasizes the formula. So really quick, we have only just a few more minutes. So you have written some books. Tell our audience, about them. Where can they find them, and where can they stay connected to you and all the amazing things that you are doing?
Well, we're working on updating our site, MathewKnowles.com, just my name, and by going there, you can find out all of my books. I'm a public speaker. I love to do that, and you can see my social media handles. So just simply go into MathewKnowles.com.
Perfect, perfect. All right, well, in a little bit of fun, I have some rapid fire questions for you. Only 5. Are you up for a little bit of fun at the very end, towards the end here?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, okay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
I love it. Describe your style in one word.
Wow, you got me on the first one.
I did good. Just kidding.
My style in one word is intensity.
Intensity. Ooh, I like it. Okay. What is a good spy code name for you?
Jedi.
Jedi? Jedi Knowles? Yes. Jedi Knowles, I like it. Okay, what is your favorite type of music?
R&B.
R&B, classic. Are you more cautious or bold?
What was the second word?
Bold.
Cautious.
Okay, cautious. Yeah. What is your best non-curse word? Wait, hold on. Let me say this one more time. What is your best non-curse word, one-word insult?
Whack.
Whack. Oh, I like that. That's good. You're so whack. Not you. I like that. I'm going to go home and tell my kids that. They're going to, my mom, don't use that word. No, I'm kidding. No, I love that. I love that. That was good. Okay. Well, before we get out of here, you know, you've said so many incredible and amazing things. I know you could speak for hours on your background and your experience. Thank you for bringing awareness to the conversation with regards to men and women, what they go through. But, you know, just one final thing that you'd like to say, as I don't know if you'd heard me in one of my opening, you know, listening to the radio coming over here, a lot of stuff, a lot of robberies, a lot of crime, pandemics, usually you see this. You know, what are your words of encouragement for people who are definitely struggling right now?
Well, my thing I would like to leave is the importance, how very much it's important that we get vaccinated. We keep getting chance after chance after chance for this COVID to be behind us. We've chose, especially as Americans, to come up with all sorts of political reasons, racial reasons, all sorts of reasons not to get vaccinated. I think the time will come that those that are not vaccinated will be on the front line of disaster, meaning death. And I certainly don't want to see that. So to those of you that haven't gotten vaccinated, I ask that you please do it for yourself. And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your loved ones, because this is real. This is not a hoax. This is real. And to a lot of men, a lot of you haven't gotten vaccinated, as simple as this may sound, because you're frightened of getting a vaccination. You're frightened of a needle. And I see it all the time, how we're messaging this. We forget how many millions of people have a phobia against getting a needle. So please get vaccinated.
Yeah, I can appreciate that so much. As cancer survivors, we have both been injected with things we probably would prefer not to have had in it, but in an effort to survive, we did. And so I agree with you, although I don't, you know, I have several friends who refuse to get vaccinated, and I am very respectful, but I also, like you, want people to live. I want us to get back to what not that I feel like when you talk about cancer or anything, you know that there's not a back. We can never go back to March 12th, right? We can't go back to March 12th, but we can make the future better and brighter. But it does take us on. And, you know, you worked in science. You worked in those healthcare facilities. I feel like a lot of similarities and synergy there, because I did once upon a time as well. I used to implement healthcare informatics systems. It was a company I owned. And so I worked with laboratories and scientists, and I knew that they work hard for the benefit of society. So because this is coming from the science community, I don't like that people try to politicize it. I'm with you. I appreciate your words. I appreciate your time, Dr. Knowles. You are amazing, and I really look forward and hope to be able to collaborate with you in the future. In the meantime, I hope you have an amazing holiday season with your loved ones, with your family, and celebrating what will be an amazing new year, 2022. Yes?
Thank you. I look forward as well as 2022 January, I will turn 70 years old, and that's a momentous occasion for me. So I look forward to it.
I love it. And you do not look 70. I know you hear this all the time. Gotta love that, right? But you look great. I would never guess it. I definitely had you, and it shouldn't make sense, right? It wouldn't make sense, but I definitely had you pegged around 50. So
Look, thank you. I love you for that. What a great Christmas present. Thank you. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. Don't stop. Don't stop. Don't stop.
Well, Merry Christmas, and we'll see you again on the other side of the new year.
All right.
Take
Goodbye.
care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And to the audience at home, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. I hope you've enjoyed your time with us and letting us be unsugar-coated. We've definitely enjoyed our time with you. Stay tuned for next week. Until then, take care, and thank you for letting us be unsugar-coated. Bye-bye.
What are you still doing here? Come back next week.